Hey everybody! Wow, okay, so we're in a bit of a delay, but it's a very big honor to host here Amanda. And I'm very, very, very excited because it's an international live today. So, hi Amanda, how are you?
Hi, Hen. Very good to see you. I'm really honored to be part of one of your Facebook Live events. I actually have never done this before, so also thank you for facilitating this.
That's really fine. That's really fine. First thing that we are doing in Facebook Live is to share. So, what we are going to do is going to our group, to our post, and start sharing it in our profile, in our Facebook page, in different Facebook groups.
Mhm.
More people may see us now. And if there's anyone that is already live right now, please write anything, share with us your thoughts, say hi, and so on. And Amana, you can also get inside our group and do the same. And I see that we have already more than 8 people live. So hi, just say hi, everything.
Thanks for joining, everyone.
So Amanda, for people that don't know you yet, and this is a big disappointment for them, please tell us more about yourself.
So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Amanda Murachko. I'm originally from Ottawa, Canada, and I am currently living in Amsterdam, and I have been for the last 8 years. Over the last 3 years, I worked for an e-commerce company that maybe you're familiar with called Shopify, leading the market development team in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And that's how Chen and I actually came to know each other. And a few months ago, I had decided to leave Shopify and join an amazing company in the social media management space called Buffer. I'm currently their head of strategic partnerships. Aside from this, I also consider myself to be an entrepreneur with a variety of side hustles. I'm also the co-founder of a women in tech organization in the Netherlands as well.
So we'll speak about it as well, of course. And I guess that many people will ask themselves, how did he leave Shopify?
I know.
And some other people might also ask questions about Shopify, but that's not the main point that we'll speak about right now. We decided to do something very, very special to inspire more women out there and people in general in this time, speaking about entrepreneurship, about your way as a very strong, impressive woman in high tech, in management positions and so on. So maybe we'll start about your own story, talking about your way to the top.
Sure. So my path into tech was not very linear, and I think that's becoming more and more common, particularly amongst women in the industry. So my first degree was actually in political science and communications, and growing up in Canada's capital, I truthfully thought that I was going to be a career politician or a bureaucrat. Around that time, I was doing some freelance work for some members of parliament, as well as my student association, and it was
Me
quite
too.
yeah, perfect. That's something I didn't know about you actually.
Sure.
In Canada, yeah.
Okay.
But
Trudeau?
pardon me.
Trudeau?
Uh, I wasn't working for Trudeau, although I have met him before he was PM. But yeah, because of that, it was quite difficult to find developers and designers who were also working within political science or within that field. So I started to test the waters a little bit on my own, designing flyers, building basic websites, that sort of thing. And after a few months, I started to realize that I actually really enjoyed that type of work, to the point that I decided to go back to school to get a degree in web development and interactive multimedia. And I think that's where I had my first aha moment, because shortly after receiving my second degree, I relocated to Amsterdam. And my first job here, to be completely honest with you, I was living paycheck to paycheck. I had accumulated a lot of student debt in Canada that I had to start paying off. And having a very hands-on degree in web development allowed me to have more independence. And that, I think, was what pushed me towards entrepreneurship. So I started taking on side projects that I would find on Craigslist, which is very much a throwback nowadays. I was doing things for a very cheap rate, but it allowed me to build my portfolio, and it also helped me kind of subsidize some of my bills that year. So I hustled really hard. But then after that, web development was a really key part of many of the jobs that I had afterwards as well. So I began to really build kind of my skill set there. However, back when I was doing web development for companies, I wasn't working in the tech scene at that time. So that opportunity really came from co-founding our Women in Tech meetup. So I started to network with amazing women from all over the world who were based in Amsterdam. And we started partnering with these gigantic tech companies like Uber, Google, Facebook, Netflix, and so forth to build our community. And from there, I had my first job offer in tech. So Google for Entrepreneurs, which is now known as Google for Startups, was opening their first campus in Amsterdam alongside the Next Web. And they were looking for someone to lead their events and marketing. So for me, it was a bit of a steep learning curve at the beginning since I had never worked for a startup before. But suddenly we were mentoring startups and helping them scale, building our own community. And I had an amazing boss who still remains to be, for me, a great mentor. And he still advocates for me to this day. And he really pushed me outside of my comfort zone. And I remember him pulling me aside after one of our stand-ups. And in the Netherlands, most Dutch people tend to be very direct with doing business, which is effectively the opposite of how Canadians do things. And he said to me,
totally the same in here, by the way.
Very direct or very non-direct? Very direct, yeah.
Very direct, very warm, very nice. But sometimes people may think that to be too much direct may be a bit offensive or pushy, but if you read that, there's a book called The Israeli Chutzpah, which means our pushiness. So because we are too direct and too pushy, we can achieve many, many things. But if I'll try to sum up the things so far, so first of all, the first suggestions for people is to go to meetups, to go to events, know some people, and from that point, you can get much, much better. If you'll stay at home at this time, it will be harder, but even to try and take a part of live events, do you think that will help the same or at least somehow?
Absolutely. I think, it's not necessarily just about attending events, but yeah, building your network, building your expertise. A lot of folks who come out to our events, our Women in Tech events, aren't in the tech industry, but they're there to learn and just expand their skill sets into kind of new territories. So I think that's definitely super important. But beside that as well, like I think there, from the three things that I could recommend in order to really take that next step into your career path would be, first, I would say, fake it till you make it. I wasn't the world's best developer. I'm still definitely far from it, but putting yourself out there really forces you to learn. Many of the female developers that I currently work with are actually self-taught or learned through coding boot camps. So if that's something that you're interested in, you don't really have to have a formalized education anymore. In fact, I actually don't necessarily believe that's the way to go anymore. So I would encourage you to look for alternative ways to upskill yourself as well, and events is a great way to do that. Secondly, I would say to create opportunities for yourself. The community I created definitely was the thing that helped get my foot in the door, and was something that constantly still stands out on my CV. So from that, I also improved my networking and my public speaking skills. So I would say not to wait for someone to necessarily hand you a golden ticket, but to create that for yourself.
And by the way, because let's talk about that. Many people also in this group think that university is not necessarily the way, or even some of the guys in here that are at their sorry, because I'm too excited. They're at high school time and think that school is not necessarily the right solution also when they are in quarantine, so they are not going to school anymore. So you think the same, that you can get many skills at home by so many ways, like live streaming, like courses online, and so on. But the most important key role is to create a network, and by getting into relevant persons, you can show your portfolio and progress in your life, right?
Yeah, I think it can be a mix of that. I mean, I think if you're going to look for self-learning opportunities, you have to be quite disciplined, and that's not necessarily suitable for everyone. Some people do benefit from traditional forms of education still. But if you are someone who really thrives in an independent way, or, you know, you are maybe on a bit of a budget and you can't necessarily afford to go to university, I would say that there are a lot of ways to kind of build your skill set and do that by trying things out as well. And I think, you know, there are a lot of young entrepreneurs that I've met, particularly in the Netherlands, who have started these multi-million-dollar businesses and they're 18, 19 years old. And I'm like, how do you do it? You know, but I think there's a lot of, you know, willpower and like iteration and, you know, trial and error. Yeah.
By the way, Amanda, as we're in different continents and you've got peace and quiet in your place, we're still in this time between 18 to 20 or 21, usually go to the army. So yeah, you might have people that are already rich at that time.
I know.
But I might say that people in our area also started their entrepreneurship at a younger age, and we do have here people that are 14, 15, up to 18 that already have online stores, some of them creating their own brand, and some of them also have, for example, modest fashion or do drop shipping at the time and doing just great. But I want to focus on your specific way because I'm very inspired as well, and I think that the people that are watching now are inspired as well. And I also like to admit that from my last trip to Amsterdam, I saw many, many talented people and get to know some new startups that I didn't know about. And I think that it's very great. And I guess that I'll be in Amsterdam once again. And not for smoking, for the people that think.
There's lots of different things that Amsterdam is good for.
Of course, of course. So if you are in Amsterdam, try not to just smoke, but also get to know the great startup and great person that are at this place. What I want to ask you, Amanda, is once you've been in Google Startup and start increasing your network and connections and so on. So you started working in a startup, and why did you make this shift to big enterprises and so on? Because from my endpoint, I can say that there is something very excited about being in a startup. You are with a small team, but big achievements in a very short period of time. Sometimes people in an enterprise may think that they are just a small part in a big organization. Tell me, how did you get there? And if you like that way.
Yeah, so I mean, the job that followed that was Shopify. So, you know, I was working with many startups in my previous role to Shopify, working with lots of developers. And I just kind of fell in love with the, you know, the entrepreneur community. And the job at the time that I had taken was for partner manager for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So meaning that I would be able to work with web developers and entrepreneurs all over the world, helping them grow their businesses. So there were a lot of similarities there too. And you have to recognize as well, when I joined Shopify, we didn't really have a presence. I mean, we did have a few people in Europe as well, in the UK, but we didn't have a very significant presence yet in Europe. So in many ways, when I had joined, we were kind of acting as a startup within Shopify. So that was quite exciting to me too, to be able to kind of grow our ecosystem, which had already kind of been developed from many of our partners from around the world, and kind of double down on their successes and help them scale as well on the platform. So that was kind of my transition over to enterprise. Not that I hadn't, or not enterprise, but like larger companies. Not that I hadn't worked for larger companies before, but I think it was kind of the sweet spot of having worked for a large company, but still operating in many ways like a startup.
By the way, speaking about Europe, for the people that are watching us now, can say that there's a big impact from the last function that you've been in. For example, if we can see Shopify payments in most countries in the continent, we can see more and more offices that are start getting momentum in Europe, like in France, in Germany, and not just in the UK and Ireland. That used to be a couple of years ago. And we're still waiting for you to come as well, and not just you, but Shopify in general. There are many new platforms, e-commerce platforms that are starting now or in the past year, and now in the pandemic time, and once we're all in a lockdown, we see the big growth in that. I wanted to ask you about your way, whether there was any struggle because you were a woman, or anything else that you felt that was missing?
I think there's always going to be some sort of struggle that you feel as a woman in the tech industry, or as a woman as a lead. I think there's always going to be some kind of issues that come with that as well, unfortunately. So I've been working full time for 10 to 12 years, depending on how you slice it, in various different industries. And not once have I actually worked for a woman. Many times I've been promoted without a salary increase, only to find out that a male counterpart was earning substantially more than I was. You know, I can speak to a handful of former jobs where I had to actually fight for a salary increase, which can also be exhausting. And I recognize too that that's, you know, not necessarily because like I'm a woman, but I think women are less likely to advocate for salary increases. I think there's been many studies where men are more likely to advocate for themselves to receive the appropriate salary. So, and no company will ever say it's because of gender explicitly, right? Perhaps you don't have enough experience, but I truly believe if you're doing the same job as somebody else, you deserve equal pay. And imposter syndrome is a real thing as well, particularly in tech. With women in tech in particular. And it's something that I have faced in many of my previous roles. It's something that I currently face. So it's always something that's kind of top of mind as well. I'm a guest lecturer at some of the local universities in Amsterdam, and my session is usually about diversity and inclusion within tech and entrepreneurship spaces. And there have even been studies that show when a woman is applying for a job, she's less likely to apply unless she meets all the criteria on the job listing. Whereas a man will apply if he meets a significant less amount of criteria that's listed or he's more likely to inflate his skill set as well. Job postings even are often written in a very gendered way, particularly within tech. Even company culture of many startups tend to revolve around pizza, beer, and ping pong, which may sound cool to a lot of folks, but oftentimes it can be really non-inclusive. And all of these.
Sorry to interrupt, but that's something that I've never thought of. And I wonder, how would you feel more comfortable in a happy hour?
Well, I think, you know, for myself, I do enjoy the occasional drinks, but I have had colleagues in the past who, you know, they don't drink for religious reasons, or maybe they just choose not to drink, or, you know, they have children and family at home that they have to. So it's like the social aspect of revolving around these key elements is not always super inclusive. So you have to think about how to create those social ties with your team beyond drinking events or beyond after work activities, for example. So I think you have to kind of think beyond that traditional kind of scope.
I must add to what you've just said that I felt something that may be even more sexual, problematic. And if you remember at the time that we've been in Last Pursuit, which was only 4 months ago, but it feels like
a lifetime ago.
Yeah. And we met some of the speakers that were on stage, and one of them just mentioned that, well, she was beautiful, and her manager just asked her to go with skinny to work just so he can compliment her more. And we see such things as well. And this is way problematic. And of course, not feeling good to go to work, but maybe you felt something like that before.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. There have been issues in the past with not necessarily male colleagues, but sometimes partners as well, you know, kind of crossing boundaries and things of that nature, or, you know, sometimes like an offhanded remark, or, and that's, you know, it's almost like, it's hard to say that you kind of get used to it, and it shouldn't, there's a normalizing culture around it, which shouldn't be the case. And of course, like I work remotely, so I actually don't have contact with many of my colleagues now. So, but when I was in more of a traditional office space type of environment, I think it was more prone and problematic to those types of things, especially if you're, you know, drinking and things of that nature. You know, sometimes lines are crossed, and yeah, it's very unfortunate to think that that is still commonplace in the industry.
I must say, by the way, that most of this industry of e-commerce, and maybe you'll change my mind, but at least locally, is very manly, and I feel very wrong about it. And let me share with you some of the examples that people, maybe the local, may mention. First of all the credit card companies are ruled by men. The COOs, CEOs, CMOs, they are all men. Second of all, it's the platform. Let's talk about our local e-commerce platform like Elementor, which is very, very famous at the moment, but it's a plugin for WordPress. Wix, that also has all the management, which controlled by men. And even if we'll speak about app developers, Shopify app developers, that at least from one person that also went on stage, which is Ruth, that you might saw her YouTube lecture that just uploaded from our last Shopify meetup in Tel Aviv. All of them are men. Not speaking about logistics and shipping and so on. Do you feel the same also in Europe, in Amsterdam, in Holland, or globally? Because I know that also, when speaking about Shopify, and I'm not saying that might be wrong, but maybe there is a place to combine more women, is that the CEO, Toby, is a man. The COO, Harley, which is a man. And if we'll continue to Glenn, the international, the head of international department and so on, we're speaking about mostly men. Do you feel?
Yeah, it's something I was cognizant of, and I still am. And I think, you know, representation in particular within the EMEA markets doesn't really have gender parity. So when I was working at Shopify, I had managed hundreds of partners from across the world, and only a handful of them were women. I think the best thing that you could do with your platform is to give these folks access to opportunities. So if I had met a partner who did good work and happened to be a woman or from a diverse background, I would push for them to be on stage at our events or give them opportunities for interviews on our blog. Truthfully, I'm not that high up in the food chain, but if I have an opportunity to amplify a voice from an underrepresented community, I take it. And I think we as women in the industry have a duty to build each other up, to create more diverse and intersectional spaces for one another, to create access to opportunities for others as well. So I think if you can take anything away from our chat today, I would urge you all to think about how you can create these spaces for these individuals and truly sponsor them within the tech industry. So I think that's the most important thing, is, you know, building each other up and, you know, making sure that these voices are amplified.
By the way, I must say that you're an activist yourself, right? You are volunteering in a tech community for women developers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we run a meetup in Amsterdam called She Sharp, which was a little bit of an oversight as to how difficult it was to pronounce. But it was initially born as Girls in Tech Netherlands around 7 years ago. Initially, it was just created to meet like-minded individuals, but now many of my closest friends have come from this organization. So there are opportunities to participate in events. Many of our events are now moving to online, actually due to COVID-19. So now if anyone from outside the Netherlands would like to join, it's completely open for everyone. We have mentorship opportunities available. We try to give access or promote other opportunities as well, such as discounted tickets for tech conferences for women or speaker opportunities and things like that too. So we're all volunteers, so we try to do the best that we can, but of course, always looking for new speaker opportunities as well and looking for other stories to share. We do sometimes technical trainings as well for folks who are looking to learn how to code or building an e-commerce shop, for example, just as a small example.
So girls in here, you are more welcome to join She Sharp. It's S sharp, like the tagging that the hashtag that you're doing in Instagram, and E. So by the way, it's really, really nice to know this organization and know about the opportunity because of two organizations that are working the same in Israel, mostly in Tel Aviv, but not just, also combining the places that are more far away or people that are not next to some kind of startup environment or not necessarily going to a university and like to learn code by themselves. First one called Queen Bee that I personally volunteered in, been in a hackathon for mobile app development, mostly in Android. And the second one is She Code, if I remember right. So yeah, we totally like to cooperate and do things globally. And if we can help anyone, anywhere in the globe, we'd love that. So another thing that I would like to say is that a little bird just whispered me that you'd like to help women entrepreneurs and maybe even to run an agency of yourself.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're interested in building a web store, I would say that I would want to give you some advice first. I would say that success doesn't come overnight, so to be kind to yourself, most importantly. There are a lot of tools out there like Shopify, which makes setting yourself up fairly easy. So I would say not to aim for perfection, but just try to get something up and running as soon as possible. You can always iterate from there. And that was also my problem when I set up my store. For those of you who are worried about balancing, I have some side businesses, but for those of you who are worried about balancing family life, I know that's a concern that kind of comes up quite often. I think entrepreneurship can actually improve these things in many ways, as you're no longer confined to a rigid 9-to-5 schedule. So you can kind of work when it suits you and your family. Also, don't be afraid to ask for help. There are many communities out there that can assist you, kind of like these two communities that have come together today. I do a lot of free work on the side for female entrepreneurs. There are lots of free workshops to get started. So there are so many resources out there to help you, even if you face financial limitations. And lastly, I want to reiterate that the majority of entrepreneurs on Shopify are actually women who start businesses later on in life. So try not to fall into the trap that it's too late to become an entrepreneur, because it's never too late to get started.
It's a really good point. It's a really good point. I know that, let me share some of the stories in here. So yeah, some of the girls that I guess I can say girls because they are under 18 that started their entrepreneurship, whether it happened after they became influencers in Instagram and thought that they can create a line of clothes of their own, for example, or in other cases as well. It doesn't have to be fashion. They're creating other aspects as well. But some of them, as you've just mentioned, feel that they don't have the money to do it right now and delay it. Some of them are starting their way in start creating, manufacturing their products, going on live, and then just stop it. Don't try to do some paid campaigns because they don't have the money at the moment, and they are going to work as rental in digital marketing agencies or other just to get more skills. What is your opinion about that? Would you go with an economical plan, a yearly economical plan, and start running this, or do something on the side?
Yeah, I think, sometimes it's financially difficult to go all in on your business right away. So I think to create like a minimum viable product or to test, like there are so many tools out there like Shopify where it's like relatively inexpensive to at least get your plan started and test things out and try to validate some of your business ideas before quitting your job, let's say. So I would never recommend people to just quit their job and go all in. But I also think that, if you're really passionate about what you do and you have a really great business proposition, I think there's nothing that's holding you to a regular 9-to-5 job. So sometimes it is kind of just, when do you take that plunge? But I think, just getting, if I can inspire anyone on this chat today, is just to get started. And I think, taking that first step is often the hardest part. The first step and then pushing the button for it to go live. Realistically, there are so many free themes that exist on Shopify. You can get a store up and running within a few hours. You can put some ad spend behind it, see what's converting, double down on the products that are working, change, A/B test, change things around. There's so many opportunities that are available within the e-commerce space. So I would just say, the first thing is just to get started and test things out.
So I'll give here a couple of minutes for people to ask you questions from the crowd. Just to mention that Amanda used to be the head of EMEA, the Africa, Europe, and Middle East area in Shopify. So if you have any question about Shopify to Amanda's way to speak about how to start a business, it's that time. I'm not sure if we ever hosted or will host such a high management in this organization from the one hand, and such a nice person on the other hand as well. So,
thank you, Chen. I really appreciate all the kind words and for allowing me to. I never had a chance to come to Tel Aviv during my tenure at Shopify, but it was always on my radar. And even now, I keep saying I'm going to come and speak at one of your events in person. So it's really nice to at least be able to connect with your community virtually.
As we've mentioned, this is just a promo, and we really wish that all this pandemic will go away and we'll be able to host you live in a big stage with 250 places that we already had in Microsoft in Israel. So we're cooperating with Microsoft for Startup as well. And now it's very common to have Microsoft for Startup, Google for Startup, Amazon for Startup. And I guess that once Facebook will start a Facebook for Startup as well, just a matter of time. But once again, we'll wait a moment for people to ask questions and see if there's anything there. Okay, just to mention, by the way, couple of things. We created today a new Shopify official meetup, and I also wanted to promote Israel at that point, and I just want to have all the community to know that we try to mention Israel in the Shopify official meetup website, but it's not yet confirmed. But we'll continue with different events for Tel Aviv, and I would like to thank Amanda for all the help that she's done for us for Israel, whether it's the different events to help Israeli people to become Shopify experts in the expert marketplace and other aspects. And that's even though that Shopify is not officially in Israel at the moment, not with an office. So there are many, many things that can happen online or from distance. And once again, Amanda, as I don't see a new question, I'd like to thank you for taking part in our live. We'll, of course, record this one and upload it to YouTube for the people that couldn't be in here at the live, and also see other comments that might written after our live will end. And I'll tag you so you'll be able to comment for everything in here.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Chen. I really appreciate it. And I also want to thank the Israeli partner community as well. You've built the community. You all have built the community together, so it made my job very easy. And the Israeli community as well is just very dynamic. We have a very great set of partners there. Great set of merchants as well. So many good case studies to come out of the region. So I think you all should be very proud of the work that you've done too. So thank you all for having been great partners to have worked with over the last couple of years. So
thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.